Welcome back, everyone, to Berlin Noir. Today we are going to be building the Berlin Zoo, and I guess right off the bat I'm placing it in a slightly different location than where it actually is in real life. I guess if you're familiar with this area or if you live in Berlin, then maybe you can tell in those brief moments when I zoom out in the very beginning. But for everyone else, the zoo in real life is located at the southwestern tip of the Tiergarten, on the opposite side of a little canal that runs its way through, splitting the zoo with the rest of the Tiergarten. And I guess on this map here, I kind of already built up that location. I have a train line running through there, and also some buildings that I placed a couple shots. If you follow me on Instagram, I've posted some pictures of that area on Instagram, but that was all built off camera. But yeah, so I didn't really have a place to put anything there, and not to mention just that area, this was unintentional, but just that area has kind of just been developing on a much smaller scale than other parts of the city, or compared to real life. It's just more or less how it's happened, since I'm doing a loose recreation, so that area just happened to be much smaller, being cut off with rivers and the train lines that run through there. So that's doesn't leave a lot of room for something like this, since it's a sizable zoo. I guess average, I suppose, for at least for a normal American zoo. I'm not sure the size of, or what really frankly a European zoo is like, but yeah, it looks like a nice place. And yeah, so it's located at a slightly different place. It's still right next to the Tiergarten, so it's not too far off. It's just, instead of the southwest corner, it's at the northwest corner, so not too far off, not a big deal. But anyways, that's that. So I guess let's get into the build. So for the zoo, I mean, it's, even if I had really good maps and references, it's hard to copy, and also it's more or less kind of pointless, I guess, to try and copy with great accuracy a zoo. I mean, yeah, it's not like this is a zoo building game, so I didn't really, I looked at Google Earth and the aerial views I had from this time, and the only thing I really copied was the main path that I have going around, and the double path that works its way through the heart of the zoo, which is paved, and then I just put the the dirt paths weaving through just randomly. But I also copied this little pond area, which exists at the zoo in real life and also back then. And rather than actually dealing with the pain of using real water and dealing with the water physics of this game, especially when it comes to placing a very, very shallow, pond or lake or river. When it comes to anything very shallow with water in this game, it's more or less impossible to control. Sometimes, flooding sometimes can be an issue. But one thing I really hate is there's a slight difference when, say, you have a really deep, if you have an ocean and it's really deep out there, then usually the waves are larger than if you have a river and it's shallower, or if you have like a still moving or a still lake or whatever it may be, then usually the waves are smaller. But when you have something as small and shallow as what I just built over there, then the waves are they just don't look right. They're out of place for sure. It looks like you're out in the middle of the ocean almost. So yeah, I didn't even attempt to use the actual water. So instead I used the water surface props, I guess, or more or less. And that actually worked out pretty well. I like that. I do go back and just more or less just copy that entire water surface area that I placed down and paste it down like but hitting the page down a couple times using Move It. So basically I layered it so it's a little thicker, and in doing so I made it definitely darker and look more like an actual body of water, because there it's a little hard to tell maybe, but with just the one layer of the water surface there, it's pretty see-through. It almost just looks like a glass, like watered colored glass. So later on I do fix that and it turns out pretty decent. But so here is this is a cool little tidbit I wanted to actually talk about. So this was going to be what I was envisioning, the exhibit for Roland, this massive beast, this behemoth. So this guy, he was a elephant seal back in the 20s and 30s, I believe, at the Berlin Zoo. He was at his largest about 4,000 pounds, which I guess for the majority of my audience, that's a little over 1,800 kilograms. But yeah, so he was a ginormous elephant seal, and I actually stumbled across him not when I was researching the zoo, but actually some time ago. I believe actually even before I started the series. I don't remember why, but I just came across a video on YouTube. Who knows, could have just been some random recommendation. It probably was, but the video for him, yeah, I'll post a link in the description. I wanted to show a little clip on the actual video here, but there was it wasn't a free video. It was asking about like licensing, so I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna pay for a short clip. But yeah, so I'll link the description to that video. He's a cool dude. I would have liked to have seen him in real life. I believe once he actually died, they made a statue of him because apparently he meant so much to the zoo and the keepers and everything. So yeah, they actually made a statue, and unfortunately, from what I've read, that it was partly destroyed, or not partly, almost entirely destroyed during World War II and the bombings of Berlin, and all that remains is his face, which is at some museum in Berlin. But yeah, so anyways, yeah, that's just a cool little tidbit, I guess, for most of you who would have no idea that such a absolute unit of a elephant seal existed. I don't know. Just looking at that dude, there's a couple pictures online as well besides the one I showed. I don't know, I enjoy looking at his pictures. But anyways, I guess moving on from that. Yeah, so for most of these little exhibits, I honestly probably made them too nice. So here, right here, I added this is a vanilla zoo asset, which aside from the very one over there right there in the top part, that's the only vanilla asset besides this little gated exhibit that I actually placed down. But this one I convert into PO just so I can use the gate, because realistically, zoos back during this time, regardless if they were in the US, Europe, the Middle East, they were not very nice. Animal welfare wasn't the top priority, I'd say, of these zoos. For the most part, there was just a lot of small enclosures, a lot of concrete, not a lot of greenery, not a lot of grass, not a lot of trees, which I considered doing that in the city, but I decided to go for, I guess, a more modern looking approach, being that there's a lot more grass and greenery, slightly larger enclosures, just because they're fake animals, sure, but I wanted to make it look nice. But also, having a lot of concrete enclosures, it would probably look weird in the game, just considering we're familiar with zoos being a little more green and lush than zoos back then. So yeah, I didn't really place any large, or I guess not large, but any pavement enclosures with a ton of just small iron fences just surrounding it like they really existed more back then. But yeah, so I mean, like I said, it looks fine. I like it this way more. And so that's a small thing that I guess doesn't really matter after all. It is a zoo, and as I said earlier, this is not a zoo building game. If you want that, then what's that? Planet Zoo? There's a game like that came out recently. It looks cool, but not really my thing. It's by the same people as Planet Coasters, which is a fun game, but it's a different type of detailing, which is much more tedious than the detailing that I do in City Skylines. But anyways, so for the most part, I placed all those enclosures down, mostly just using single fences and some walls occasionally. There was one enclosure which I placed down lines right there, which I did a double barrier, a wall, as you can see, around, and then a fence on the inside there, because don't want some little kid reaching in and getting his finger bit off. Which, yeah, so I did that. I wanted to do more like pit enclosures. I know that's a thing in a lot of American zoos before they were renovated and improved the enclosures for the animals, where there'd be like kind of just a big pit, and then there'd be an island within inside the pit and they were usually for like lions or larger animals that could maybe pose a threat to zoo goers, any visitors. So just there was no way that any animal could get outside the enclosure, because it's just a massive pit with a little island on the inside, which is where they would live. But that's hard to deal with something like that, because the terrain working in this game is trash. It sucks. We all know that. But just making a small pit for such a small enclosure would not have been worth it, because working with terrain like that is not good. But so for here, I downloaded some animal spawn markers, because the game does come with animal spawn markers, but they don't all work. But because they're intended for use in the asset editor, evidently. But a couple of them still work, because I remember when I tried to build a zoo before in another city, which before I started making YouTube videos, I'd place a couple of the spawners down, and some would come in, and some or most wouldn't. And also they moved around a lot more, whereas with these spawn markers, they more or less just make a circle around the spawn. Sometimes they venture outside it, but for the most part they don't. But anyways, I found that tree there, that slanted pine tree, is actually a vanilla asset, which is very cool. I just happened to stumble across that, and it really was at a perfect angle to rest against the large rock inside that enclosure. So that looked cool. And just added a stone, like swimming pool type little water thing for these gorillas and chimps. I placed gorillas and chimps in the same enclosure just for some variety within, because the models for the animals are all identical, so it looks kind of weird having the same animals that are more or less carbon copies of each other running around. But so this I didn't place anything in this enclosure, because again, this is where I envisioned the Roland, the elephant seal, to be. So it's clearly an aquatic enclosure with some land on the outside, so you can step out if you wanted to. But it's a little different than the real life enclosure that he lived in, but that's what I went for. I like the little island with the rock in the middle. It reminds me of a similar enclosure that actually exists in the SeaWorld in San Diego, inside California, that I used to visit just about every summer as a kid, which I frankly miss SeaWorld. But anyways, it was fun times as a kid. But anyways, I digress. So, more just detailing the enclosures. There wasn't really much to it, just placing, plants, rocks, wood, whatever, trees. I did create I wanted to make some variety within the, enclosures here, because, different animals obviously are from different parts of the world, and they are going to require different environments within their little enclosures. So there was one that I made was just like dirt and very rocky, maybe for like prairie dogs or something like that. There's one like that at my zoo in Phoenix. But yeah, I don't know. All the enclosures are custom, as you can tell, with the exception of the one building in the very middle, which I placed from the beginning. I did that just because the zoo parks that came with the Park Life DLC, they're all just, four-cornered. They're rectangle, they're square. There's no really variation in shape, so a zoo with a bunch of square enclosures is not very realistic. And not to mention, some of the assets don't look very nice. There's there's little pools they put in there with the water is like a teal color, which doesn't look good. So yeah, I wanted to do entirely custom enclosures, and since I did find the animal spawners on the workshop that I could actually, have animals wandering around, then that worked out pretty nice. Which, honestly, when it's all said and done and I actually finish detailing everything, because I still have a long way to do or go placing down trees and bushes and whatnot, but in the end it looks actually pretty nice. It looks like a real zoo. It's very lush, very green, and it looks pretty cool. But yeah, here I'm revisiting the little cage. I wasn't really sure what to put in there. I'm not sure what the asset actually has walking around, if you kept it as an actual building rather than a PO object. But what I imagined was it to be some sort of like bird enclosure, where the gates would be maybe a mesh over it or some sort of net so the birds couldn't fly out. But I've seen most zoos that I've been to have something like this, just a large cage more or less with a lot of trees and stuff inside for just a very more or less miscellaneous bird enclosure. So that's what I imagined there. But so with the animal spawners here, I definitely did have to reused several of them. Like the lions, that's one that I kept just one enclosure because I didn't want to have multiple lions around in the zoo, because that's more of a majestic creature, I suppose, something that I didn't want to have multiple areas of, so I wanted to make this one a little more unique and special. I think the elephants, I believe, I only have one enclosure of them, but some of the smaller animals like the deers, antelopes, bison, I believe there was one, those I definitely repeat just because they're more or less, I suppose, generic animals, if that makes sense. So I had to fill up the enclosure somehow, so that's how I did it. But here, as you can see, I'm revisiting the little lakes and just copying and pasting the water surfaces down to make it look darker and not so see-through. And it definitely works, as I said. I mean, hopefully you could have told there, or you could see that the difference in the water texture, how it looks. Because the big thing that is it got rid of it being so clear, because that was bugging me. And also, like, if for the most part unless you caught it at a perfect angle, the glare from the sun in the game made the water look not good at all. Just, yeah, I don't know. That depends a lot on the cube map you have and some of your lighting settings, but I'm not going to adjust that, so that leaves just trying to make the water itself thicker and darker, which worked out by layering it. So I suppose that's a technique that some of you could use in your cities. I'm not sure. It's really the first time I've actually used that asset myself. It's a new-ish asset though. The water surfaces, not super new, but I wanted to use it and make like a custom nice fountain or something, which I will definitely use in the future, since there are definitely nice, fountains or small ponds outside of like palaces in the city. So that I will do later on once, whenever I happen to build something like that. But yeah, and I know it works well, so yeah, that'll be something in the future for sure. But so somehow I actually managed to talk through this entire video. I did not expect that. I kind of half expected to just leave you guys to listen to some music. But yeah, so this is pretty much it for the episode. I hope you enjoyed. Next week, I think I'll work on a under construction U-Bahn line. That was recommended by one of you. Something that's pretty cool. Definitely something that will be an awesome build, and I'm sure fun to watch as well. So that'll hopefully be next week, maybe the week after. But anyways, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the build. Definitely, again, leave your suggestions on what you want to see built. This zoo was a suggestion, and next week for the U-Bahn is a suggestion. So yeah, let me guys know what you think, and see you next time.